This is Gareth Southgate, and this is the Three Lions podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions podcast. My name is Russell Osborne and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. I hope you're well. You join me as generally most of the English leagues have concluded. The playoff finals, the FA Cup final, the Champions League final is still to come. But I must also say congratulations to Chelsea in the Women's FA Cup final. Sam Kerr. She certainly is at home there at Wembley, isn't she? And also the WSL. The title there, it's going down to the wire, isn't it? A last day fight out between Chelsea and Manchester United on securing that WSL title. And that is kind of where this episode is directed. The women's game. And with the 2023 World Cup fast approaching, I'll be having a few episodes dedicated to the Lionesses and their trip down under. Now, I'll come to my guest very shortly, but firstly, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Now, the most recent episode was my guide to England's youth level tournaments this summer. Now, a couple of those have already begun, and with this being a Lionesses episode, I wanted to catch up with how our Young Lionesses have been playing in the Under-17 European Championships over in Estonia. They began with a 2-1 victory over Poland, leading 2-0 at half-time, thanks to a brace from Arsenal's Michelle Agameni. Unfortunately, they then went down to 10 when Bristol City's Mary Ward was sent off for a challenge in the box. Now, fortunately, that penalty was saved by Leicester's Sophia Poor, but Poland got their goal in injury time. So a great start for the girls. And next, they would go on to play Sweden. Again, another couple of goals for Michelle Agameni. Leicester's Ava Baker getting on the score sheet too. Sweden's goal came via a Katie Reid own goal, so winning 3-1 there. And with that victory, it meant that they were through to the semi-finals with a game to spare. And that spare game was against France, who also knew they were through to the semi-finals after they'd won both their games against Poland and Sweden, both by 3-0 scorelines. And that final group game against the French was a 1-1 draw, with Mary Ward, Bristol City, opening the scoring before the French equalised in the second half. It meant that the group was complete. England went through with 7 points behind France on goal difference. Now they would play Group A winners Spain, who had won all their games. And in a bit of a surprise, Germany were eliminated after only winning 1 and losing 2 of their games. So the semi-final came around on Tuesday the 23rd. The Spanish, well, they took an early lead, which they took with them into half-time. England came out strong in the second half. Arsenal's Katie Reid with an equaliser 5 minutes in. That brought the game level, but 2 late Spanish goals saw them through to the final, winning 3-1. They would play France, who beat Switzerland in their semi-final, 10-2. Commiserations to the girls, but experiences like this can only make you stronger. I'm sure we'll hear more from some of those names in the very near future. And something that I'd not previously mentioned, I don't think it's gone entirely under the radar, but I think its presence and awareness since its draw has been very similar to the men's back in January 2018. I'm talking the Nations League. Now, talk of this for the women had been brewing for about a year now. And back on the 2nd of May, the draw was made for the inaugural tournament to begin in September of this year. Now, for those that aren't aware, the Nations League is a tournament for European national teams They're placed in small 4-team leagues of equal standing. Now, these leagues are tiered. So there are 4-team top-tier leagues. That's League A. That features Europe's best. And as European champions, that's where our Lionesses are. Then beneath that, there's League B, 4 groups of 4 teams of mid-range level. Then below that is League C, a slightly bigger pool of nations. It features 4 groups of 4 teams and 1 group of 3. So in total, throughout all 3 leagues, there are 51 eligible European nations. So just to quickly take you through it all, at the top league, League A, this is divided into 4 teams of 4. They'll each play each other home and away between September and December this year. The team that finishes top of each of the 4 leagues will go together to play a semi-final tournament and final in February of next year. The teams that finish bottom of each league will be relegated down to Leagues B, and they'll be replaced by the winners of League B who go up. And this is replicated the further you go down. So who will the Lionesses be playing, you may well ask? Well, they've been drawn in League A, Group 1, alongside the Netherlands, Belgium and Scotland. And by coincidence, they're all very local to each other, aren't they? Whilst the dates for each game have been set, the venues haven't as yet. I'm sure nearer the time I will cover those, but they should be some tasty games to take in and a good opportunity to take the Lionesses around the country. And in doing the research for this, I've since found out that Wembley, as a venue, is able to host up to 22 sporting events across any one year. And I think, excluding the potential of these 3 games, Wembley looks like it's already down for 20 sporting events in 2023. Of course, we've already had the likes of the Finalissima, the FA Cup semi-finals for the men, the Women's FA Cup final, the England men's internationals so far, and to come we have various cup finals and playoffs, and also there is one NFL game. There's the Rugby League Challenge Cup final, and there's also a wrestling event in August. So personally, I can't see all the Lionesses games being played there. I don't know, maybe Scotland? I don't know. Just so you can understand the level of the top leagues, League A, Group 2, features France, Austria, Norway and Portugal. Group 3, Germany, Denmark, Iceland and Wales. And Group 4, Sweden, Spain, Italy and Switzerland. So a few nations that we've recently played before, all up in the top leagues. As I'm sure you remember, we've had some convincing victories over the likes of Lithuania and Latvia recently. Well, both of those teams have been placed in Leagues C. That's kind of give you a gauge of the levels of the Nations League. Right, let's get on with this episode. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the Three Lions podcast, Abdullah Abdullah, author of the book, The Lionesses, The Gamechangers. Abdullah, hello there.
Hey, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
No, you're more than welcome. I've received your book, The Lionesses, Gamechangers, available through Pitch Publishing. An amazing look at the Lionesses and their sort of rise to fame over the past few years. How did this interest in the Lionesses come about? Because this is your third book, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's number three, but I think the interest in the Lionesses has kind of been a slow movement over the last couple of years. So obviously, I have kind of been into the tactical side of the game for probably 4 years now. I've been following football since I was probably an early teen, like everybody else, and but my interest in the women's team kind of grew in 2018, 2019. And then just because on the men's side, I'm a Chelsea supporter, I inherently I kind of grew into the women's team first, over there when I made the switch over to start writing about them. And then from there, obviously there's a core, of English players that kind of obviously then piqued my interest into the women's team. So, for me, that became a very, obvious place to look at. And then after I did the first couple on Lyon and Chelsea, just to me, the combination of the home tournament, a World Cup the following year, and England, seemingly looking a lot better with the whole change, all the changes, that I thought, it made sense to hit that audience and that team and kind of see what that progression would look like.
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting progression. The book starts at, as you say, the sort of the time that you began taking an active interest in the women's team, sort of that period of 2018, 2019, when Phil Neville was in charge of the Lionesses. And obviously there was the transition through to Sarina Wiegman. And there was it's the foreword in the book by Charlotte Stacey. There's a little bit there that I picked out. She said that the team prior to Wiegman was made up of all these gourmet ingredients, but it just simply was the recipe was all wrong, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it's I really like that analogy. Actually, it's just the team has always been one of those where they've had so many top level players, top class players coming through to the level where you would almost associate them with being, potentially playing for the best teams in the world. But the problem always ended up being that Phil Neville and the staff at the time, even before his time, nobody could really get them playing in a cohesive way. It's kind of, sometimes you see it on in a lot of top sides where you have like maybe an excessive amount of top players maybe in certain positions, or you have like, 3-4 really good options, but it's like you're almost too spoiled for choice, too much. And I think that causes a lot of issues. And, I think Phil Neville just could not get his tactical choices and kind of personnel choices in the right games to go. I mean, they did make a semi-final, but it just, to me, it's just like getting that, it never felt like they could get that one step forward because it was just like a mismatch of top level players, but the chemistry wasn't there inherently by the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of look back at Phil Neville's time as, we all know it was a little bit hard, and perhaps his communication with the press wasn't as good, obviously, as now it is with Sarina in charge. But maybe it was right at the time, and it finished at the right time for Sarina to come in and take over the reins. Yeah,
she came in at a time where I really feel like it was almost a perfect time for her to come in. September 2021, you're a year and a half away from, or like a year away from a Euros, and then you've got 2 years till the World Cup. And so, she had the time to really look at the squad, mold it into what she wanted, and had enough time to really make that transition. And at the same time, she's come off winning an international tournament with her home nation, and you could see that there was, and then I mean let's not run around it. That Dutch side was very good, but there were better teams. There were better teams at the time who could have competed. I mean, you look at teams like France, you look at teams like Norway, France, and even England at the time. You like, objectively speaking, a lot of those players from an individual standpoint could even be better. But the way what she did with the Dutch team was kind of use them very well as a collective.
Yeah.
And, make sure that they play to their strengths and manage to get the right players playing in the right positions and kind of cater towards them. And I feel like England maybe to an extent needed that in their own setup, rather than playing 11 world class players. Maybe stop playing 11 team players that could probably then kind of come together and allow a few of the star players to thrive. So I thought she came at the right time. And though I don't think anybody anticipated the level of jump in performances and the levels that the team were playing at so quickly, and that adaptation to be so smooth, at least initially. So yeah, I think it was a little bit of a surprise to everybody.
Though being Dutch, obviously she holds that sort of total football model quite dear to her heart, doesn't she? And she brought that in with her to the England side and to the FA, sort of that dynamic and creative side, which is so Dutch, basically. And the players under her just took to it, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I really felt like she was. I think one of her biggest strengths is just being able to convey her ideas to the team and kind of explain how she did. I think being a communicator, being someone who's been so deeply rooted coming from a country that's so deeply rooted into a footballing philosophy and a footballing mindset, where they have this philosophy, this identity. And the good thing about it is that they can they mold it into what their understanding of what they call total football is, right? So with Phil Neville, I feel like he was a bit more supposedly of a man manager than more of a tactical manager. And obviously he's coached in the men's game and everything before, but it never felt like he could convey his ideas or even execute his ideas as well. And I think the players maybe sort of, it wasn't resonating or sitting with them really well. Whereas with Serena, I felt like the best thing that she did, she kind of explained to everybody, look, these are your roles. This is what I want the team to do. This is how I want us to play. And just being able to communicate that information and turn around and say, this is how I want things to happen, is, I think, probably the best thing she's been able to do. And I think probably that's, one of the core reasons of her success so far.
Yeah. The book looks quite a lot at the tactics of what she uses. And am I right in saying that she came in initially with a formation in mind, like prior to the Euros, was a 4-2-3-1 formation, I think is what I got from it. But she was happy to sort of transition through different formations to a 4-3-3, and everyone sort of were on board with that. There was no real issues with her changing formations.
Yeah, I think part of it is down to the fact that I think because she's proven herself in with her accolades and kind of what she's done in the game already. I think the players were a lot more open to taking in what she said and said, all right, what, she's proven it. She's a winner. She's done it on the international stage, not at a club stage. So she knows what she's talking about, and she did it with arguably quote unquote lesser players in certain positions. So I think the players were more open, and I think back to being able to communicate, I think she must have basically said, look, the formation in a sense. And I think this can go across the board in any team and most elite managers. It's the formation itself doesn't really matter. It's more the principles of play, and it's more how they how they can navigate themselves from that system and use those principles and execute it that way. Because I think if you're going to be tactically flexible, you're going to be able to tackle different teams, because you'll have teams playing with three center backs. You're going to have teams playing with four. You might have five attackers coming forward towards you, 4 midfielders, 5 midfielders. So I think that kind of combination of being able to be tactically flexible in terms of the system and formation, I think is important. And then being able to execute the same ideas across the board, I think is important. And then I think it also gives the team to be able to play their massive squad of like very, very high quality players and let them kind of be in positions of strength. And, like we can take an example of someone like let's say Neve Charles or someone like that who's obviously naturally an attacker, but she's been playing a lot of fullback positions for Chelsea. But then you put her in a wing back position, for example, for England, she probably thrive because it's less defensive responsibility. Or you play somebody like Laura Coombs, who plays at Manchester City. She's been excellent from a deeper or number 10 position. You can probably play 4-2-3-1 and play her over there, or an Ella Toon. And you can kind of keep switching these players around, and you're going to need the full squad of 25 eventually, because you never know what's going to happen with injuries, and I'm pretty sure it'll come up. But look at it now, like England have suffered with 3-4 major injuries, and now that squad depth is really coming into it. But the advantage is that Serena has played so many systems and used so many players that the other players know exactly what they have to do when they slot in. So I think it just helps.
Gotcha. Well, take us back to that amazing summer that England picked up that European Championships at Wembley. I know you came over to watch some of the games. So you're fortunate enough to get. I think you were there for was it from the knockouts onwards?
Yeah,
that must have been amazing.
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic. I actually only planned to go for 3 games. I had bought 3 tickets. I had tickets for one of the semifinals, the final, and one of the knockout games. And then kind of the day before I flew, I had the opportunity to go and watch another one of watch one of the quarterfinals. And then I had the opportunity while I was there to watch the second semifinal as well. So I ended up watching about 5 games. So 2 quarters, 2 semis, and a final, which was incredible. It was amazing. And I practically got to watch England play from the quarters to the finals, which was fantastic.
That quarter final against Spain, being 1-0 down until late on in the game. And was it Georgia Stanway that equalised, or did she get the winner? I'm struggling to remember now.
Yeah, she got the winner in extra time, yeah.
That's right, yes. Down at Brighton. Amazing game, that one. But then being behind in that game and then moving, and obviously winning it, and then moving on to the Sweden game, and again being under the cosh for best part of the first 15, 20 minutes. Really showed a different dimension to the Lionesses that they hadn't really needed in those previous group games against Austria, Norway, and Northern Ireland. And that's the sort of confidence that they'll need to think back to, I think, going into this World Cup.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think arguably the teams around them have become a lot better. I think those teams that have been those teams have they've just gone better and better. And then obviously they're going to have to face, if they are to progress to the final stages of the World Cup, they're going to have to face the likes of the United States and whatnot, who are arguably top team in the world. They've won 2-3 World Cups, which I think for them is a massive achievement. That game against Spain was probably my favorite of the tournament, especially the first one I watched. It was such a high, and their ability to come back, I think, was great. And then you look at the game against Sweden, which ended up being a huge 4-0 win. It was a rout, but yeah, that first 15-20 minutes, it felt to me when I was watching it from the stands in Sheffield was like, all right, someone's they figured out how to stop England from playing, at least in certain areas, and build up and in possession, and their ideas were being blocked. They had a certain game plan to go against them. But what I think was the best thing about that game was the small adjustments that England made in the first 20 minutes, being able to recognize, okay, this is not working. They figured this part out. What can we do in the spur of the moment to change that tactically and try and get on the front foot? And I think that was probably one of the problems that they had previously in the previous regime, because it was those small changes and being able to recognize how and what to change in a certain amount of time without it being too late, I think was the biggest problem that they had. And then the fact that they were able to do that and then being able to really make that change very quickly, I thought was absolutely fantastic. And obviously they ended up winning that game by a huge margin. So the ability to show in both games, from both being a tight game against Spain and then a bit more of an open game and a bit more of a easier game by the end of the game against Sweden for them, looking at the scoreline, I think it shows the depth of range of being able to play against two top quality oppositions. And being able to beat both of them in those two different fashions, I think is just shows great progress and depth.
Yeah, and then obviously onto the final. Throughout the tournament, Serena famously used the same starting 11 for all those games, and it was onto the Germany game where in the final where again. The same starting 11 began. But on the bench, we had the likes of Chloe Kelly, Alessia Russo, Ella Toone. Now, sort of looking forwards, haven't really got, well, I'm sure we have, but sort of the depth of substitutes is going to be slightly different, I think, this time. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you look at players like Chloe Kelly and Ella Toone and Alessia Russo, who are on the bench for practically the entirety of the tournament last year. And I think now they're arguably going to be players who are going to be starting for the first team, whether through injury or not is a different story. But, you have Chloe Kelly, who I think is now arguably going to practically start every game. Ella Toone's kind of cemented herself as the team's number 10. And then Alessia Russo has kind of taken up the mantle from Ellen White. So in that scenario, I think it's very much you've got the substitutes moving into a first team role, but then now it really comes the test of finding the substitutes for those substitutes. So it's like, do you who do you go? You have to bring in the next set of players. So like we said, like your Jess Carters, your Niamh Charleses, your Katie Robinsons, your Laura Coombs, who's probably a little bit older than the rest of them, but still is new to the England setup practically. It's these players now that have to come in and start to start to step up and play the role that the other three played in the last tournament. Because I think one of the things that Serena does is she almost has a set 18 players where she's like, okay, 25 is there. It's important to have 25, but I have these 18, and then her substitutes to call on have been practically at least 3 of them have been practically set in stone, and then the 4th and 5th becomes very much situational based on game state. So it's about finding those replacements and making sure that those substitutes have the same impact that the Ella Toones and like did last season, because they made a huge difference. Ella Toone scored a massive goal against Sweden. You had, Alessia Russo scored a massive goal against Sweden with the back heel. You had Ella Toone provide the assist for the goal against Germany in the final. So when you have these players coming off the bench and making such a big impact, whether it's in a final or a semifinal or a group stage game, it becomes important. And I think that's kind of put more confidence in the substitutes bench, because, I mean, anybody not starting a game, whether you're on the substitute bench or not, it's especially at a major tournament, they're like, will we really have, an impact? Will we really be able to really do anything? Or are we, we're not first choice? But I think their roles last season has kind of proven to the rest of the players that doesn't matter whether, it doesn't really matter if we're starting or not, because if we are the first choice substitutes, we can come on and make a difference and push ourselves to either start games or be the first choice to come on practically anytime there's a game to change to be made in any sort of game. So yeah, I think the substitutes role is got a huge importance in this England setup, more than I think we've seen before.
Yeah. The book that you've written, it's such an unfortunate situation that it's come out at the time where England, the Lionesses, and some of the players have unfortunately suffered a fair few injuries. Obviously, Beth Mead has been out for some time. Although there is a little bit of talk that she may be getting back to fitness by the time the World Cup comes around. But I have to be honest, I'm not sure that's going to happen. Leah Williamson, obviously. Fran Kirby has ruled herself out. Millie Bright has been going through an injury period. Lucy Bronze has had some surgery as well. So I don't think she's going to be as maybe as fully fit as maybe she could be, but we'll wait and see. How is this going to affect the Lionesses? How's this going to affect Serena Weidman, and what's going to be her thinking at the moment and going forwards?
It's huge. I mean, you'd think that maybe with one or two, I mean, you'd rather have none, but with one or two major injuries, you still have the depth, and the core team to be able to contend with that sort of injury slip. But I mean, listen, any team with that sort of injury list, and not just the like squad players, with all due respect, every single player that you've just talked about there are starters for this team, and ones who would, in an ideal situation, be your number one choice for their positions. I mean, you could look at someone like Fran Kirby on her I mean, practically she's one of the best, if not the best, number 10s you have. And then, the same thing with Beth Mead was top scorer in the Euros. So you start her on the right hand side, and the list goes on in terms of the injuries. But so it's really going to test England's setup. But then this is where you have to see the next generation coming in. I mean, let's take Beth Mead for a second. Chloe Kelly has proven to be an excellent deputy. And then behind her, you have Lauren James now, who's really exploded for Chelsea, and Jess Parks had a really good season for Everton. Obviously, she's another one that's just been ruled out for the rest of the season for Everton. Oh. But she's another one. You've got Katie Robinson, who's doing really good things, at the scene, and probably could be the next up and coming. So you've got Chloe Kelly, Lauren James, and I say Katie Robinson as your replacements for Beth Mead, which is really good depth. And then up front, you've got, you've got the likes of Rachel Daly now, who's really come into her stride, one of the top scorers in the WSL right now. Lauren Hemp's there, Alessia Russo. So, and then at the number 10, there is no Fran Kirby, but Ella Toone has stepped up. So you've got someone there. Jordan Nobbs is having a very good season for Aston Villa. Georgia Stanway has been around, and she's doing well for Bayern Munich. And then, at the back, yes, that's a big hit because no Leah Williamson. She's practically out, but then Maya Letitia has stepped up for Manchester United in a centre-back role. I think she's another big one. And then you've got Lotte Woman Moy, who's been in and around and is having an okay season. For Arsenal, Esme Morgan stepped up, in terms of being able to find somebody who can play at right back. Jess Carter's had a fantastic season. Niamh Charles is proven herself. So I think England are again both lucky, and I think it's really good planning from Serena that, yes, she's had some major injuries in all three, phases of the team, but the backups are of requisite quality to some extent. And I really feel like with maybe a little bit of juggling around, there is an opportunity to be able to get this team to playing in a similar vein than they were last season. And maybe this is the time for her to say, this is an opportunity for the next generation of England players, in your Maya Letitias, in your Niamh Charleses, in your Ella Toones, to step up and say, all right, we're as good as our predecessors, and we can go ahead and win a major tournament, even if they're not there. And if England managed to do that, then you really can't say anything other than this is probably the best setup in football right now. With you can have 3, 4, 5 major injuries to world-class players, and the replacements have come up and kind of stepped in and done what they were meant to do.
No pressure whatsoever. The one conundrum, and you briefly mentioned her there, the one conundrum that I can see Serena having, Rachel Daly, as you say, she's been on fire for Villa in the WSL, played left back throughout the Euros, but smashing the goals in left, right, and centre. Where does she fit in to this World Cup team?
Oh, it's the age-old question of how do you play Rachel Daly? I mean, there's a Twitter movement of her basically being told she is not a fullback, and for the longest time, everybody was like, she's not a fullback. Why is she playing a fullback? Why is she playing a fullback? Um, and then now I think just finally, I think while she was at the Houston Dash, before in the US and NWSL, and she was scoring goals there. She was one of their best goal scorers.
Yes.
But I think it's just that because it was so far away and it was the US, just wasn't at the forefront of everybody's minds. And I think manager was like, all right, yeah, no, but we have Ellen White and then we've got these players and Jodie Taylor and whatnot. And okay, we want to fit Rachel Daly in and we have a problem at fullback, we'll play her there. And I think versatility is good. But when you have a player so clearly fantastic and class in a certain position, that's her natural one, you got to take advantage. And I think now that Ellen White has retired, you've now got this position where you need two strikers, and before it was probably Ellen White and Alessia Russo. And I think Alessia Russo will eventually be England's number one. I think there's no doubt about it. But I think right now she's still a little bit raw. She's still really now hitting. Still has to hit her stride. And I think when you go into the World Cup now, you've got no choice but to play Rachel Daly as your number one striker, because she's one of the top scorers, if not the top scorer in the WSL right now. She's been doing it for a team that's battling for fourth, fifth place. That usually wouldn't be the case. Alessia Russo's had a good season, but maybe not a fantastic season to match Rachel Daly in comparison. So I would say, and then leading the line for England is no easy task. It is a lot of pressure, and obviously there's a system related thing, but I just feel like this is the time for Rachel Daly to take the reins as a striker. And I think you're arguably going to get a lot more output from the position now than you ever did in the last couple of major tournaments, just because she's an out and out pure goal scorer who knows how to combine and mesh well with the team and her play style. So yeah, I think Rachel Daly as a striker, this is the time to unleash her there and move on and see how that works.
Well, we shall see. Come the World Cup, initially Haiti, China and Denmark stand in the way. How can England do in this World Cup?
It's a tough question. It's tough because you look at it and you go, they should be able to navigate through the group stages without a problem. And when you get into the knockout rounds, you worry because Germany are getting better and better. They've got some world-class players to come back for themselves. France seem like they're finally buckling up their ideas, and that generation of class talent, I think is ready to step up. And I feel like a team like France is in the position that England were last season, where can they go ahead and do something big? You got them. You got the US national team. That's always a huge threat, and they look very, very good. And you've got the others. Your Sweden's never go away. Canada's been a pretty decent team. So there are a lot of teams that they have to navigate that they probably didn't have to do. You didn't have to do in the Euros. You didn't have to face in the Euros. I think that this team can, being the defending champions and the requisite quality that they have, I think a semi-final is got to be a bare minimum. And I really think that they can do it. I think they can really make a semi-final, and they have the ability to beat all of the teams that we just mentioned. I don't see a case where you look at that team and go, oof, you're going to be outclassed by this team by a huge margin. I really feel like this team can beat anybody on their day. It's just a matter of kind of navigating through that and setting up for the right game plan for the right game.
Gotcha. The book Lionesses Gamechangers is available through Pitch Publishing, and I'm sure through any good bookstore. Abdullah, thank you very much for your time in telling us a little bit more about the Lionesses. Are you heading out to the World Cup?
I'd love to, but I think this trip's a little bit too far. But no, I'll be enjoying it from the comfort of my own home. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the World Cup, and I think we should have a fantastic tournament. And thanks for calling me and having me on.
My many thanks go to Abdullah there for his time. His book, Lionesses Gamechangers, it is available through Pitch Publishing, whom I must also thank. You can follow Abdullah over on Twitter at kunabd, KUNABD, and of course at Pitch Publishing. They are the leading UK-based independent sports publishers. They've got some good books in their catalogue. Now, I'll be back with you very soon. As you may have seen, Serena Weigmann will announce her World Cup squad on the 31st of May. So no doubt I'll be taking a look at that soon. So until then, take care of yourselves. Cheers.